Well, good day, viewers. Today we have a 2008 Toyota Rav4. It's the Sport with the V6 engine. I think it's a 3.5, I think, but I'm not sure. It's here because the check engine light is on. It has been reported to be flashing, and it's misfiring. I drove it in the shop and I could feel it misfiring. So I've got a clean battery charger hooked up to it. We're going to scan it and see what codes it's got to tell us about this misfire. So this is a known vehicle. I've worked on it before, so I'm loading the previous history. I haven't seen this vehicle for a couple of months now. It's got 227,000 kilometers on it, but I'll put the mileage in after. Let's do a network code scan just because we're here, just to see if there's any other existing issues. Probably some TPMS lights. Random cylinder misfire, cylinder 2 misfire, cylinder 4 misfire. Yeah, P0300, 302, 304. And on the pending side of it, P0304. Transmission computer is reporting the same codes. Anti-lock computer is not liking the engine control computer data. And the rest is, by looking at it, okay. Let's see if we have finished the network scan. No, we're only 9 modules in. Four-wheel drive control module is probably disabling operation because of the engine control fault. Okay, we're just about done. 12 modules, 13 modules, and that's the end. So again, do we have any other codes to worry about? Doesn't look like it. Random cylinder misfire in P0302 and 304. On the OBD2 side of the computer. So let's look at engine data. See if it has any misfire counters. Codes, unless it's under data. Misfire data. The car is not running right now, but it may report misfire history. I don't see any data here. Misfire counts, okay, there it is. So this is obviously live. Well, let's start it up and have a look at it. So with it running, it's counting misfires on cylinder 2 and 4. That's interesting. Cylinder 1, 3, and 5 are at 0, and cylinder 2 and 4 is counting like crazy. So what's common between those two cylinders? Huh, interesting. Well, let's pull the engine cover off and have a look. So cylinder 2 and 4 are the front two next to the rad. I see that I've at one time changed the coil in number 6. I think I did that about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. Let's have a look under the hood. So I got the engine cover off, and I don't see anything visually wrong with the wiring here. I do see some evidence of rodent activity, some rodent poop down there, but injector wires on number 2 and 4 look okay, and this is cylinder 2, 4, and 6. This coil has been replaced. You can see it's a different style coil than these ones, but that's number 6. So this is 2 and this is 4, and 1, 3, and 5 are under the intake manifold. Now, I guess we should run it and unplug these coils one at a time to see if we can isolate, in fact, that it is that. We should also put it in clear flood mode and listen to it. This does have a tick in the engine, I noticed. So let's try clear flood mode first, if that works. Well, clear flood mode didn't work, so I'm going to try unplugging these coils one at a time. Now, gotta get 2 hands. unplugging that coil makes no difference. Actually, it seems to start running better when I unplug that coil. Now it seems like it's not missing anymore. Definitely missing now. Let's see if it's still got misfire counters. Well, that's weird. After unplugging number 2 coil, the misfire has gone away. Oh boy. It's not counting any misfires on number 2 or 4 now. There's number 2 cylinder, number 4 cylinder. Number 6. At the top of the page now. 1, 3, and 5. No misfires. So remove the coil out of number 2 and 4, and looking in the boot, don't see any carbon tracking. Here's a spark plug out of number 2. The insulator looks clean. Focus. Plug is not bad. They're iridium plugs. They look okay. But the misfire has fixed itself. Oh boy. So I put the 2 plugs back in, and I put the 2 coils back on, and the misfire is back in cylinder 2 and 4. Let's have a look at the wiring diagram, see if there's anything common. So I unplugged number 4 coil again, and it was misfiring, and then I unplugged number 2 coil and plugged it back in, and the misfire stopped. As you can see, it flat lined at a cumulative 61 misfires. But it was misfiring on that startup right from the get-go. Let's shut it off and restart it. I'm going to shut it off and restart it. No, it's not misfiring now. That is strange. That is very strange. It's not misfiring now. So here's a Mitchell version of the ignition wiring diagrams. And it's interesting that the ignition coil number 2 and number 4 are fed from the same splice in the harness. So the red wire in pin 1 of each coil is battery positive. Pin 4 is ground. The second pin, pin 2, it looks like the control pin, IGF and IG2. One of these 2 pins is the control pin. No, this has got to be a common. So this has got to be the control pin. Pin 3 is control. So these coils contain transistors by the look of it. So we're going to load test these battery feed wires to both coils. They come from a common power supply, as you can see here. And let's see where that comes from. Well, on this diagram, it comes from this circuit, previous page. Oops, diagram 2. I imagine it comes from a fuse, so we could current wrap the coils. Have a look at how much current each coil is drawing. I think it was this one here, a red wire. I better double check. So all of the ignition coils are fed on this red wire to location 2 on the previous diagram. Let's scroll that one down. And that is actually this red wire here, which comes from the ignition relay, which is fed by the ignition fuse, 15 amps, which is in the engine room. Well, we're going to load test those two circuits first off. So the two red wires in here, as you can see, it lights a headlight on that one. Key is on, and it lights a headlight on this one as well. So that headlight takes about 3 amps. Let's check the ground on the opposite end. So I put my test light connected to power so that when I touch a ground it lights up. Should. And this pin here is ground and it lights, and this white pin here at this end is ground and it lights. So is there a possibility we have two defective coils at the same time? What is the likelihood of that? Let's current ramp the coils. I remove the 15 amp ignition fuse, put a fuse jumper in there, fuse is back in the circuit, amp clamp in there, and I'm watching current flow. And it appears that that circuit might feed the injectors as well, but I'm pretty sure the high current spike is the ignition coils. Unfortunately now though, it's running smooth again. It's not misfiring again. If I pause this and zoom it 8 times, all the firing events look the same. You can see the smaller ones I think are injector firing events, but I'm not sure about that, although it does say ignition feed. But it's not misfiring now. I'm going to need to restart this a couple of times and see if I can catch it misfiring again. So that same circuit does feed all 6 fuel injectors as well. It's line 28 on the previous diagram. There it is there, and it comes off that same splice that feeds all 6 ignition coils. Well, I'm going to keep shutting it off and restarting it to see if I can get the misfire to return. Well, I've started this thing 24 times now, and it hasn't started to misfire again. So I'm kind of at a loss as to what's causing this. It's got to be an electrical failure, because it wouldn't come and go like that if it was mechanical, in my opinion. There was a ticking noise coming from the engine, like a rocker arm lifter noise, but I can't see that affecting 2 cylinders simultaneously, number 2 and 4. I've load tested the power and ground to the number 2 and 4 coils, and they test okay. Power up a headlight, no problem. Current ramping the coils now as we speak, and they look textbook perfect. So I added a channel 2 and I synced it off a number 6 ignition coil control circuit, which is the 3rd pin in. All 3 of these coils have different color wires on that. So the firing order is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if it starts to misfire, which it hasn't done, I should be able to see if it's an ignition problem. I did check pin drag on these terminals on both coils, and they're perfect. Like you can see, it's running perfectly smooth now. I'm going to set up the Veris Edge lap scope and take it for a road test. So I've got the Veris Edge set up here so I can watch the ignition coil current ramps triggered off of number 6 cylinder. I switched the 2 channels around, so channel number 1 has the trigger on it. And split screen, and you can see the misfire counters over here. 0 now, it's running perfect. No lights on, so we're going to take it for a road test. Well, I come to realize there's another issue going on with this thing. Look at the temperature gauge in this thing creeping up. I got no heat out of the heater. I wonder if we got a combustion leak into the cooling system, and maybe that's antifreeze getting into 2 and 4 cylinder that's causing the misfire, because it's not misfiring now at all, but I got very poor heat out of the heater. In fact, I had to turn the heater off because it's cold in the car. Yet the temperature gauge shows that it's actually climbing into the red. I'm heading back now. So I didn't bring a jacket, and it's pretty cool in the car. Temperature gauge is going right into the red. Now, she did mention that she had poor heat out of the heater, but I thought we were looking at a plugged heater core, thermostat issue. But I think I did a water pump on this thing a year ago when I put a thermostat in it at the time. Now the temperature has come back down and we're starting to get some heat out of the heater again. Still no misfires, but I'm going to run it back to the shop and shut it off for a few seconds, and while it's going through a hot soak, have a look at the coolant level in the overflow bottle, see if it's low on coolant. Starting to get a little heat out of the heater now. Still not great, but better than it was. The plot thickens. So over the recording of that drive cycle, it hit 130 degrees Celsius, which is too hot. Let's just pause this for a second and replay it and see. We can see where it actually climbed up. Temperature is pretty high right now. Here you can see when I started driving it, it was about 80. Actually, that wasn't where I started driving it. That's 2,000 frames ago. So it must have... There you go. That temperature fluctuation is indicative of either a low cooling system. See, there's where it peaked at 130 right there. So we're going to look at the coolant level on this thing, and I'm going to shut it off. So looking at the coolant reservoir, and it appears to be empty. This is a pressurized tank, so I don't want to relieve the pressure on the cooling system right now because I want to see if that causes a misfire after a restart, because it was definitely misfiring when I drove it in. Then after running for a few seconds and unplugging a couple of the coils, the misfire went away, which would be concurrent with if it was burning off coolant. But I didn't smell any coolant in the tailpipe as I was running it out without an exhaust hose in here. But the question remains, where did the coolant go? I know I did a water pump in this thing about a year ago, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, let's let it sit for a few minutes and then we'll start it up and see if the mist is present. So I checked my records. I did do a water pump in May of 2020, around 38,000 kilometers ago. I'm about to start the engine now. It's sat for about 10 minutes now. I'm going to start it and see if there's a misfire on number 2 and 4 now that it's gone through a soak. Well, I missed a couple of times there on the initial start. You can see 2 misfires. So I'm wondering if there's coolant getting into number 2 and 4 cylinder, and that's what's causing the misfire. Well, we're going to fill the cooling system. Well, this just keeps getting better. It only took about a liter, if that, to fill the overflow bottle. It's actually above full now. And judging by the temperature of the engine, 165 Fahrenheit. 201. It's not running hot. Yet if I look at the heater hoses, you can see the bottom hose there is 180 and the top hose is 95. So there's a problem with the heater core. More circulation through the heater core. the top hose is cool and the bottom one is uncomfortable to hold on to. Looking at the temperature, wait for it to stabilize. There it is there. So the bottom hose is 190 and the top hose is 95. So there's a restriction in the heater core, or airlock in the heater core. It wasn't low enough on coolant to potentially cause an overheat condition, in my opinion. But for some reason, you probably saw the temperature cycling on the dash, and it did cycle according to the recording on the scan tool, which would indicate potential combustion or head gasket leak. I'm going to run it, build pressure, and let it sit overnight. Start it up cold in the morning and see if we have a misfire on cylinder 2 and 4. I'm not liking this, it's not looking good. So I revved the engine up a little bit. And I started getting heat out of the heater, and the heater hoses became hot. So there was an airlock in the heater. Now you can see both hoses are the same temperature, roughly 135, 170, 160. So there. There you can see the two hoses are roughly the same temperature. And there's good heat out of it now. So there was definitely an airlock in the heater, but again, I don't think it was low enough coolant-wise. Although it did take down that coolant level a little bit, because I had filled it right up to the top. Well, we're going to let it sit overnight and see what happens in the morning. So I'm going to start this RAV again first thing in the morning. It's cold. Waiting for the scanner to start up here. Go look at misfire data on a cold start. And then I'm going to drive it to town if it's not misfiring. It's taking a while. Misfire data. Come on. Alright, let's see how it goes here. No misfires. Well, I'm going to drive it to town. Well, there's a 37-kilometer road test. Not a single misfire. Temperature gauge sat right in the middle. Good heat out of the heater. Car ran perfect. So we'll see what happens this afternoon. So it's sat for like 6 hours now. We've had a chance to go through a cold soak again. I'm going to start it up and see what happens. I don't get it. How can a misfire just fix itself? Are the two problems not related? The low coolant, loss of coolant, and the misfire? Because now it's not misfiring. So there's another 10,500 frames of data recorded. No misfires, not a single one. Vehicle ran fine. I used it to drive around town, pick up parts, and I've driven it another 40 kilometers and hasn't skipped a beat. So this is a mystery. Where did the coolant go? One. And why was it misfiring on cylinders 2 and 4 and now it's fixed itself? I haven't changed any parts. The only thing I did was cycle the connections at the coil, and I would think if it was a primary connection at the coil, it would have set a coil control code, not a misfire code, but who knows. My thought is to give this back to the customer and let them drive it. Keep an eye on the coolant level. See if it drops again. Maybe it did have coolant going into number 2 and 4 cylinder. Time will tell, I suppose.